The Lord will never put more on you than you can bear. First off, that's nowhere in the Bible. Second, it's not true. It's not true. I don't know who thought of that phrase, but I doubt if they were ever diagnosed with cancer. Hey, my name is Jonathan Passley, and remember to like this page, like this video, and subscribe to this channel, and make sure you share it with somebody who you think can benefit from it. Many times in our cancer journeys, or in our storms, in our trials and tribulations, whatever it is that we're going through, many times it can get to a point where it's too much to bear. It's too much. We're exhausted both physically and mentally, and it's too much. It's more than we can bear. And, God can allow these things to happen in our lives in order to sometimes to break us from our self-sufficiency, from us depending on ourselves and really depending on Him. In 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 8, Paul, he is going through a really difficult time, and, he says, we were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure it. We didn't think that we were going to get through it. He says, in fact, we thought we were going to die. And many of us in our cancer journeys, in our circumstance, our situation, in our storms, our trials and tribulations, whatever it is that we're going through, many times we get to a point where we don't think we're going to get through it. We can relate to Paul. We've run out of options, and it's a difficult time, and we can't endure it. We think all hope is lost, And, so Paul can relate, and I'm sure you can relate too as well. I know there was times in my cancer journey, where I didn't think I was going to make it. Many nights, many painful nights, where I thought that was going to be the last night. Some of you can relate again to in your cancer journeys or whatever it is that you might be going through too as well. But Paul, he continues in 2 Corinthians chapter 1. He continues and says, as a result of the crushing, as a result of the overwhelm, as a result of the situation and the circumstance that he's going through, as a result of the storm, he learned to stop relying on himself, and to rely on God. As a result, despite what you're going through, whatever it may be, as a result, sometimes God can allow these things to happen, again, not only to break you, but to break you from your own independence. So as a result, you learn to rely on Him, to depend on Him, so that He can show up and show out in your situation and really prepare you for the purpose that He has for you. God's got a purpose. God's got a plan, for your life, for my life, for your life. Jeremiah 29:11, God's got a plan, God's got a purpose for good. And many times to prepare us for that purpose, He's got to break us, from our independence, so we can rely on Him, so that He can trust us with the purpose that He has, and guide us with that purpose, so that we don't mess it up, right? Paul, he had a purpose. Again, Paul, he wrote half of the Bible, 13 books of the Bible, of the New Testament. Wrote half of the, not half of the Bible, but half of the New Testament. Wrote 13 books of the New Testament. He's considered the greatest missionary. Took the gospel to many parts of the world, and to other nations that didn't hear the gospel yet. So God had a plan, God had a purpose for him, but God had a plan, had a great plan for him, but he had to be broken, he had to be crushed, he had to be put in a situation where he didn't have any options, didn't have any other choices but to rely on God, or to rely on Christ. So despite what's going on in your life, despite what you're going through, whether it is cancer or some other sickness or disease, whether it might be something in your marriage or something at work or in your business or in your finances, whatever it may be, I encourage you to rely on God, focus on Christ, and not rely on your own understanding, and not rely on your own strength, because things might get worse, and there comes that breaking point. And when you get to that point, again, even before you get to that point, just rely on God, and He'll see you through. Because as Paul also says in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, he says, as a result, I relied on God, not myself. He said, I relied on God, the one who raises the dead. Right? So God can raise your situation up from the dead. God can completely turn around your situation 180 degrees. When you run out of options and you realize you can't do it on your own, God can turn around your situation completely. So I encourage you to rely on Him and not your own understanding. I remember in my cancer journey, when I first got diagnosed, again, I'm a very strong, very determined, resilient guy. And when I first got diagnosed, I did all of the natural methods. I did Gerson's therapy. I took cannabis oil. I took black seed oil. I ate apple seeds. I did IV therapy, the hyperbaric chamber. I did all these different things. I stopped eating meat. I didn't eat any fats and oils. I drastically reduced my sugar intake. I did all these things. And exactly 1 year after I was diagnosed, I ended up back in the hospital, worse than I was when I first entered the hospital, when I first got diagnosed. And I remember laying on the hospital bed, my wife next to me, laying there, broken, just crying in tears. And I'm not the crying type at all. My wife has never even seen me cry. This is the only time she's seen me cry. I remember laying on the hospital bed, just broken and just tired, crying. I was tired of the journey. I was just tired of it all. I was out of options, and at that point I broke. And I remember after I stopped crying, I felt God speak to me. God spoke to me and said, Jonathan, well done. You passed the test. Now I'm going to bring you out of this. And just like Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, God who raises the dead, He raised my situation from the dead, because 3 months after I had a follow-up appointment with my oncologist, and he said, Jonathan, from where your health was 3 months ago to how well it is doing now, I'm calling your situation the Lazarus effect. Because most people that were where you were 3 months ago typically don't come back from where you were. God can completely flip around your situation. He just wants you to rely on Him, to depend on Him. So again, despite what you're going through, whatever it is, if it's cancer, some other sickness or disease, whether it's your finances or your business or your work or your marriage or your family, your health of a loved one, whatever it may be, again, God can turn around your situation. So just rely on Him, trust Him, and He has a purpose for you. He has a purpose for me, and may God's purpose for me in this moment be to speak through me to you, and for you to just draw closer to Him. And may this be the message that you needed to hear in the midst of whatever it is that you're going through. So, hey, remember to subscribe to this page, like this video, and go ahead and share this video with somebody who you think can benefit from it.